This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's July 17th, 2026. And on this day in 1862, two paradigm-shifting laws went into effect in the United States. This nation was in the middle of the Civil War by that point. The Second Conscription Act and the Militia Act basically gave the Union Army the mechanisms it needed to free enslaved people as their actions took them through the South. And it opened the door for black men to perform military service. These were the kinds of laws that black activists like Frederick Douglass had badly wanted to see. And to some extent, they did what those folks wanted. But here in Middle Tennessee, we have a couple of tangible examples of the ways that those laws were used to create a kind of post-slavery slavery. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with context and backstory from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. One of the reasons Nashville's Fort Negley is so important, historically speaking, is because it was largely built by black hands. Hands and arms and backs. It was intense labor. And the people who did that work didn't have a choice. See, the Conscription and Militia Acts opened the door to black men doing military service, but nothing about it said the military needed to give them uniforms, rank, or guns. Officers didn't need to give those men the dignity of the option to fight for their own freedom. They had the go-ahead to put them to work doing the hard labor of constructing facilities to be used by white soldiers. And those leaders didn't always give the black folks in their orbit any choice in the matter. And while Fort Negley is special because of the sheer number of black laborers put to work, at least 2,700 men, it wasn't the only place here where that happened. Down in Murfreesboro, Fortress Rosencrans was built by a combination of Union soldiers and black laborers who were impressed into service. It was a massive supply depot, roughly 200 acres protected by earthworks. It was the largest of that kind of earthen structure built during the Civil War. At its widest point, the fortress stretched about a mile, straddling the railroad tracks that sliced through its middle and containing the intersection of two important roads. Inside the walls, there were sawmills, blacksmith yards, and workshops for repairing equipment. There were extensive storage buildings for food, ammunition, medical supplies, and uniforms, and loading docks for filling up train cars headed to the southern front with those goods. And even with all of that, there was still room enough to house more than 10,000 soldiers. Now, if you're familiar with present-day Murfreesboro, one end of the fortress was where Old Fort Park is now. If you know how to look, near the park's golf course, you can still make out some of the ridges that remain of what were once great earthen walls. It was humongous, and it took a lot of hard work to build that structure. The black men who were pressed into service building structures like Fort Negley and Fortress Rosencrans were theoretically free, and they were promised eventual payment. But while the work was ongoing, they experienced something very similar to life under slavery. And in his extensive research, the late TSU historian Bobby Lovett found that many had a very hard time getting the money they were supposed to have earned. So the work they were given under the conscription and militia laws was not what activists had hoped for. And the pay they were given for that work wasn't necessarily what it was supposed to be either. Today, what remains of those structures is a great reminder of the inequities that are laced throughout Black history in America. And on top of that fundamental lesson, they are also a reminder of how the promise of a law can go wrong. Because even today, it's one thing to see a measure through to passage. It's another to make sure it's carried out according to plan. In just a few minutes, early voting in the primaries begins today. That's coming up during and after the newscast.
One year ago, Congress defunded public media. So what happened next? Well, Aaron in Nashville decided to make a donation to WPLN. He was not alone, and he wrote a little note. You've always had our backs. Now, more than ever, is our time to have yours. Man, he was paying attention. That's an amazing reminder to me about this connection between WPLN's service and our community. I'm Tony Gonzalez, local news director, and I'm proud to say that we're now 100% community funded. I would love for you to join today, too. It takes about 2 minutes at WPLN.org. Mary in Burns, she took those 2 minutes to give. For her, it was a first-time contribution. She also happens to be a newcomer to the area, so she's soaking in all the local news, traffic, culture stories. This is Nashville. She sounds like a super listener to me. And now she's a member. Thank you to Mary and everyone who has used this moment to strengthen Nashville Public Radio. Give at WPLN.org/give.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. As Nashville voters begin to cast early ballots today, officials are reiterating one contest they won't be voting for. Nashville is no longer part of the 5th Congressional District. The city had been fully in the 5th until 2022, and redistricting divided the city into 3. Now the latest maps divide Nashville into 3 parts, and the 5th isn't one of them. Here's Davidson County Election Administrator John Richardson.
Everyone is familiar with the 5th Congressional District, and historically Davidson County has had the 5th, like forever. Well, now the questions we're getting is, I see the advertisements on TV, but I can't vote in the 5th. And the answer is that's right.
Davidson County sent more than 470,000 letters to voters to explain the new districts, along with revised voter registration cards. For the most part, polling places have not changed, but voters should check their card to make sure they know their districts. Early voting in Nashville runs from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. today and runs for 2 weeks at 15 locations. Closing times vary by day. You can find WPLN's voter guidance at WPLN.org/election. Well, the failed execution of a Tennessee man has prompted a new formal complaint against the doctor involved in the procedure. The state tried unsuccessfully to execute Tony Carruthers by lethal injection in May. Staff could not establish a vein in his arms or chest for more than an hour, and the doctor was unable to get a central line in. Now the man's sister, a Memphis educator, has filed a complaint through the Tennessee Department of Health. It claims Dr. Mark Walton Fowler committed medical malpractice and violated the ethics of his profession. The complaint closely follows descriptions from the legal team that had preemptively objected to the doctor's involvement. It describes the doctor moving forward with procedures despite disagreement with other staff members and causing, quote, agony with multiple punctures. The state has defended its protocol and efforts on that day. Governor Bill Lee has rejected calls for an independent investigation or a moratorium on lethal injections. The father of a boy who disappeared in Hendersonville more than 2 years ago is now suing the agencies that failed to find him. 15-year-old Sebastian Rogers disappeared from the home where he lived with his mother and stepfather one February night in 2024. It was one of the biggest local news stories at the time. His parents said he had autism and severe intellectual disabilities and that he'd never left the house alone before. Officials said the efforts to find him constituted one of the largest-scale missing child hunts in Tennessee history. Now, Rogers' father has filed 2 federal lawsuits, one against the Sumner County Sheriff's Office and another against the Tennessee Department of Children's Services. WSMV reports he accuses the agencies of failing his son, both in the way the search was carried out and before the boy's disappearance. Seth Rogers says he was never informed when DCS investigated allegations that his son had been sexually abused or about serious concerns the agency had regarding the boy's home environment. Had he known, Rogers said he would have taken action to have Sebastian live in his home instead. Rogers does not name the boy's mother or stepfather in either suit. In previous press interviews, Mother Kavy Proudfoot has described accusations of mistreatment as, quote, deeply painful. A new agreement means sick and disabled migrant children who rely on a last resort public health program will be able to continue receiving care while a legal battle plays out. The lawsuit was brought by 3 doctors represented by the Tennessee Justice Center against the state's Department of Health over a policy that threatened to report undocumented families in the program to a state agency that collaborates with ICE. Last month, a judge blocked the department from turning over that information. Now, both sides in the case have agreed to a temporary injunction that allows care to continue while the case moves forward. In addition to not reporting immigrant children who remain in the program, the agreement also requires the Department of Health to re-enroll children who dropped out after receiving letters threatening to pass their information to immigration authorities. The department must also continue annual recertification for participants in the program without considering their immigration status. What's more, it is required to send notice of the new agreement to providers and participating families in their primary language and post any further updates on its website. In a press release, the Tennessee Justice Center's executive director, Michelle Johnson, says the agreement creates, quote, vital protections for families who should never have been forced to choose between their child's health care and the fear of immigration enforcement. The agreement will remain in place until a trial or further court order. Christopher Nolan's epic movie, The Odyssey, is in theaters today, but there's only one screen in Nashville that is showing the movie as Nolan intended audiences to see it, in IMAX 70mm. That might sound like it's not fair, but it's actually a blessing. There are only 41 theaters in the world that have the technical capacity to show a movie in IMAX 70mm, and Regal Opry Mills is one of them. To show it, Regal is employing 3 specialized projectionists to work in shifts around the clock to keep the reels rolling. Regal Cinemas is headquartered in Knoxville. Their SVP of U.S. content, Brooks LaBeouf, says the extra effort is worth it.
I mean, listen, it's a 3,000-year-old story, and it's being told with the biggest canvas ever invented. I think that there's something that Nolan saw with that he wanted to pay it the respect that it deserves. The frame's so big that it fills your entire field of vision from floor to ceiling. You're not just watching Odysseus's voyage, you're on the ship.
Regal Opry Mills promises at least a 4-week run of The Odyssey in IMAX 70mm. The Belcourt Theater is also playing the film on 35mm film. The Nashville Symphony has named its next CEO and president. J. Mark Cantrell brings experience as both a musician and an administrator. He led the Colorado Symphony, the Florida Orchestra, and the Wisconsin Chamber Orchestra. He also had a 20-year career as a bass trombonist. Cantrell will assume the role starting August 1st. He replaces Alan Valentine, who held the job for 28 years. Cantrell joins the symphony at a pivotal time. The organization has been slow to recover from the drop in audience during the COVID pandemic. Since longtime music director Giancarlo Guerrero left, veteran conductor Leonard Slatkin has been leading the ensemble, and he's agreed to serve as music director for 2 more seasons. Knoxville civil rights figure Josephine Goss Sims has died at age 82. Sims served as a plaintiff in a lawsuit challenging Knoxville's Board of Education plan that would have allowed students to transfer back to their formerly segregated schools years after the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling in Brown v. Board of Education. In Sims' case, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the policy violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Sims, who graduated prior to the 1963 ruling, later became the first black teacher at a predominantly white high school in Knoxville. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. The candidates for Tennessee's August primaries have shifted after state lawmakers answered President Donald Trump's call to redistrict. The legislature redrew the state's congressional map in May, just as the Election Commission was preparing to send out ballots to overseas voters. As early voting kicks off today, WPLN's Mariana Bacquiao and Cynthia Abrams take us through who's on your primary ballot.
Middle Tennessee's maps got quite the shakeup. The new boundaries mean some candidates no longer live in the districts they're running in, and some newcomers have jumped in. The 4th congressional district now has parts of South Nashville in it.
Yeah, Republican Scott Desjardins has held that seat for 14 years, and he is running for re-election. He's a bit controversial, anti-abortion legislator who was recorded pressuring a mistress to have one. He is facing challenges from 3 very similar candidates in his party, all veterans, all conservative, Trump agenda aligned, though Desjardins is the one with the actual Trump endorsement. And there is a potential interesting race shaping up for the general election, given that one of the Democratic candidates has out-fundraised even Desjardins, and that's Mike Cortese, a current Nashville Metro Council member. He used to be in the 5th district.
Right. It was all of Nashville. And then when the city got broken up, it included a lot of South Nashville. Now none of Nashville will be in the 5th district. And a big chunk of the city's Muslim population, who incumbent Republican Congressman Andy Ogles alienated this year when he asserted that Muslims don't belong in American life. His opponent, Tennessee Ag Commissioner Charlie Hatcher, has taken issue with those comments, but still supports the Trump administration's immigration crackdowns. Of course, the president has already endorsed Ogles for the job. He did that last year. On the Democratic side, Columbia Mayor Chaz Mulder is considered a frontrunner. He's got a lot of support from national Democrats who think Mulder can flip the district back to blue. Mulder's challengers are mostly candidates from Memphis who joined the race after redistricting.
District 6, which for people living in East Nashville, that's you, is maybe the race with the most Republican dollars in it. That's because incumbent John Rose is vacating his seat to instead run for governor, and that's left two experienced, well-funded candidates vying for the spot. That's 8-year State House Representative Johnny Garrett and former Congressman Van Hillary. Both are Trump-aligned ultra-conservatives who have raised well over $1 million, but both do have less connection to the district after redistricting. In the State House, Garrett represents people who won't be voting in this race, and Van Hillary was elected to Congress in 1995, but in a completely different area. There are other Republicans in the field, though with substantially less cash on hand. On the Democratic side, the last election's primary winner, Laura Bergman, is running again. She's facing a number of challengers, including the best-funded Democrat, Cheney Mosley. Let's cross to the northwest of Nashville, up to Clarksville. That's the 7th district.
For the Republican ticket, incumbent U.S. Representative Matt Van Epps is running unopposed less than a year after winning a special congressional election. Before redistricting, veteran and English teacher Joshua Warren Sales had also been running unopposed for the Democratic primary. But then State Representative Vincent Dixie and Nashville businessman Darden Copeland rejoined the race for District 7 after the maps were redrawn, having lost their primary runs for December's special congressional race to Tennessee Representative Afton Bain. Bain said she chose not to run for re-election after she and her family received death threats for her initial bid, in which she narrowed the gap between her and the Republican winner by nearly a dozen points. Soletta Holloway, a leadership executive at Meharry Medical College, also joined the race post-redistricting.
And Laura Bergman, who is also running in the 6th congressional district, threw her hat in the ring as a write-in candidate.
Exactly. And we should mention the 9th congressional district, which was once just Memphis, now extends from that city to Williamson County. President Trump just endorsed State Senator Brent Taylor in his primary. Whoever wins as the GOP candidate is poised to flip the district red with its current makeup. And that's all we have time for. Don't know what district you're in now? We have a handy guide for you at WPLN.org.
Thanks for listening to the Nashville Villager podcast. We take this look at Nashville news every weekday. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and tell a friend or give us a mention on your socials. It really helps get the word out. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can become a member at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up next week.